All right. Welcome, everyone. Happy Sunday. Thank you for joining me in this session here for our live sacred space session for the month of November. Um, and I'll begin, as I always do, by saying that I am honored to be here with you in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty. And I look forward to sharing time with you here in our sacred space together today. So the things we'll do in our time together in sacred space, I actually have a quick, I don't know, just insight announcement I wanted to share about just two dots I connected last night uh, around the nature of what we do here in sacred space and how that actually connects to the rest of my work. Uh, then we will actually enter into our sacred space. Um, we'll have our topic for the session, which is how to recover your bliss after you have lost it. How to recover your bliss after you've lost it. Uh, Gary will give the story for our session. We'll have our talk, and then we'll have a little exercise at the end, and then we'll close our sacred space. So just the quick sort of a housekeeping announcement, random sharing, is that as I'm sure you all know, we have this year-end cohort, advising cohort. It's going to be all online. That will be starting in about not quite a week, but we're nearing the end of the registration period. And one of the insights I had is that what I do for people, when I teach healing bliss meditation, is as we move more and more into the practice and the things I'm teaching around archetypal manifestation, which is discerning the pattern of your life at this core elemental level, at the archetypal level, and then deciding, what do I like, what do I don't like? Do I like the pattern of life I'm in right now? And then identifying a new pattern, a different pattern that you then navigate toward. And then once you go to that other pattern, the pattern of your outer life changes as well. Okay. And, the common theme that underpins everything I teach on healing, bliss, archetypal manifestation is this mythopoetics. Like, this is how I read dreams. We read them mythopoetically. We'll talk about that when we start the story. And so in live advising, when I advise you on your relationships, on your career, on finding your bliss, on healing childhood wounds, et cetera, we do this mythopoetically, i.e. archetypally as well. Right. So what this means is that when you do a program, I'm like guiding you through, but it's sort of recorded, right? When we do live advising, it's like laser focused on your specific individual life pattern. So you tell me what's going on with your life. You tell me what dreams you're having. And what I end up doing, and I know this sounds obviously when I say it, but what I end up doing for people is I will read the scenario of your life as you present it to me, mythopoetically like a dream, and then try to discern, just in brainstorm mode, right? What is the archetype of your life right now? In this area, in your marriage, in your career, in your quest to find your bliss, in your healing of childhood wounds, trying to no longer be a people pleaser, setting up better boundaries, et cetera, et cetera. What is the archetypal pattern of your life in each of these areas? And then what is the meta archetypal pattern of your entire life, which typically starts in childhood, runs all the way through, affects your career, affects your relationships, everything, your health, your relationship with your body, so that you can decide, oh my gosh, this is the deep underlying pattern of my life. And do I like it or not? Do I like it or not? And one of the key ways of, because it's hard to figure out what archetype you're in currently on your own. I mean, you can have a friend, you can have a therapist, you can have someone else, an advisor like me, work with you. But it's hard to figure it out strictly on your own because it's like a fish in water, right? It's like you ask the fish, how's How's the water? Tell me about the water around you. And the fish is like, what are you talking about? What is water? This is just reality, right? So you don't see the pattern because you're in it. And so one of the most powerful ways of discerning the archetype you're in right now is by reading your dreams, because your dreams will be this low-key kind of reflection, kind of a whispering, dude, like this is the pattern we're in right now. Are you okay with that? So when you look at your dreams, um, they will be this low-key kind of revealer or clue. They will reflect some aspect of the archetype you're in right now, state of affairs you are in right now, typically within your own self. Okay. And then when we come to sacred space, when we read something like Snow White, when we read something like this story we're going to read today, if you resonate with it and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm like having insights left and right, then that counts as a dream as well, because the fact that it resonates means that it's reflecting something about something archetypal in your life. So anyway, if you like how I read dream and fairy tale, and you wonder, well, what would it be like if I had Artie read my life as a myth, dream, or fairy tale, and try to figure out what the archetypal patterns are and move forward? So not reading Snow White or the story, but reading your life, basically. That's what we do in these live advising cohorts. That's what we do when I do one-on-one. That's what we do when we're in live retreat in Athens. I think the next one will probably be in the live retreat will probably be in Bali. I'm going to be in Bali in February, scoping out locations for the retreat that we're thinking of doing in Bali in September. It's all 2023. But since I'm hoofing it all the way to Bali to scope locations in February, I might actually do like a small 3 or 4 day retreat for people who are already, in Asia and Australia, just to like pop over and spend some time together. So anyway, if anyone's interested in hanging out in Bali, either in February or September of next year, shoot me an email. If I know people are going to meet me there in February, that will kind of increase the momentum behind that. Okay. So anyway, that's just a sharing I wanted to share with everyone before we get into sacred space, because I'm talking about like the cohort and retreats, so I don't. So it's somewhat like commerce activity to even be talking about it. So I wanted to share that, get that out of the way before we actually enter our sacred space proper. Okay. So hello. Okay, so with that, let me jump into our sacred space session and go ahead and start the process of setting sacred space and then shifting all of us into our shared sacred space. So what we would like to do going forward here in our time together is to create a space together which is devoid of fear, threat, and control, in order for us to open to higher guidance from within our own selves, however we define that. Right? It could be intuition, it could be a higher guide or a muse, it could be random flashes of insight, like that come to us in the shower or on a long run or workout. We want to create this safe sanctuary space for us all to relax and surrender with no feeling of danger or threat, in order so that we can partake of the nourishment, the emotional nourishment and the spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. And in opening sacred space today, I will propose, as I always do, that we all do our best to follow the 4 principles of proceeding in sacred space. The first principle is confidentiality. Standard Vegas rules: what happens in sacred space stays in sacred space. Now, that's the rule when we do live sessions online, in person, in Greece and Paris, and in Bali. Here online, in a public session, the stream is public, the replay will be public, And so the way we handle confidentiality here is via anonymization. So if you would like to be anonymous, you don't have to be anonymous. But if you would like to be, you would come into the Crowdcast version of the stream. You would go into edit profile and change your username from whatever it defaulted to Mickey Mouse, Harry Potter, what have you, and then come in and continue chatting and participating anonymously. The second principle of sacred space is we do our best to refrain from giving anyone a feeling of threat or controlling or instilling fear in them. Okay, so obviously, maliciously, please refrain from that, but even well-meaning, right? So when we say we refrain from threat or controlling, we also mean well-intentioned threat or controlling. So there's no fixing, there's no interventions, there's no tough love saying, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you, but you need to hear this. I need to say this to you. We don't do that here. Not because it's bad, but because seeing that tough love and fixing and intervention is of the provenance of fear, threat, and control, however well-meaning. It inherently, right, dissolves our sacred space, because the definition of sacred space is it's not spiritual, it's not religious. It's the only definition of sacred space is that it is devoid of fear, threat, and control. So the minute we reintroduce fear, threat, and control, we've lost our sacred space. Okay. So it's a purely logistical, practical matter. Outside of sacred space, we can fear, threat, and control each other again. Back to the world of contracts, red lights at traffic stops where you better stop or else, right? That's all fine. There's nothing wrong with profane space per se. It's more the mix. And there are certain things you can only get done in profane space. And there are certain things you can only get done in sacred space. So we create sacred space on a regular basis so that we can get the things done that you can only get done in sacred space. So here we are holding space for each other to be however we find ourselves to be. If we are afraid, if we're anxious, if we're happy, if we're relaxed, we hold space for that. And then however we feel about how we feel. If I'm afraid and I'm like, yeah, that feels about right in this day and age to be afraid. Or we feel afraid and we're like, I feel so incompetent. I feel not good enough. Why am I afraid? Everyone else is fine. We just hold space for that. We don't try to change it or heal you or cure you. If we're happy and relaxed and we're like, yeah, I feel good that I'm happy and relaxed. Or we feel happy and relaxed and we feel guilty. We feel like, oh my gosh, the world is on fire. How could I be happy and relaxed? We just hold space for it. Okay, so that's the second principle. The third principle is a corollary of the previous one, which is that there is no commerce in sacred space. That's why when I talked about the retreat stuff, I did it before we set sacred space. There's no commerce, nothing may be sold or recommended or even suggested. So I can't sell you anything. Gowrie can't sell you anything. My editor, who will be on screen in just a moment, please refrain from selling things to each other in the chat. But that also covers recommendations and suggestions. So even if there's a book I think would really help and you should read this book, I don't even do that in sacred space. Afterwards, yes. I don't even do that in sacred space because even a recommendation is a low-key, however well-meaning form of threat, right? If you're like, oh my gosh, how do I lose weight? And it's like, well, this book, this method will help. There's an implied threat there, right? Not malicious, but there is a threat where it's like, okay, if I don't read this book, I'm going to lose out on the benefits that Artie is suggesting, right? So again, there's nothing wrong with that, but in sacred space, we try to refrain from even doing that. So selling stuff, obviously, but even suggesting stuff where I'm not getting any financial benefit, we refrain from all that because in sacred space, we are here for your energy, not for the things you bring. We are here for your presence and what you intrinsically are, not for the value add you bring, not for what you do or provide. Okay, as a seller or consumer. And the fourth and final principle is that, again, a corollary of the above, there's also no expectation of participation. So there's no pressure to do anything, right? So you can listen, you can not listen. You can chat, you can not chat, ask questions, not ask questions. You can send this to 100 friends and say, hey, you should check this out. You can send it to no one and keep it just for yourself. You can come and go as you please. Right? So there's no pressure to do anything because there is no fear, threat, and control. There's no, you better stay till the end. You better watch the replay. There's none of that. Because in sacred space, the nourishment comes from the held space, the absence of fear, threat, and control, and your presence and attention from what you are, not from what you do or provide. And all of us together will tend to amplify that effect. Okay, so that is what I propose, those 4 principles. And if you are not okay with that, that's okay. There's no fear, threat, and control for you to stay in our sacred space together. But that is where we are going together in just a few moments. So if that is not the plane you want to be on and that's not your intended destination, we will give you a moment to withdraw from the session. And totally cool. We'll still catch up with you in profane space. I'll still send you emails if you're on my email list. We'll still hang out and be friends. No worries at all. So I'll just give everyone a moment to dial that in and make your selection. Okay. All right. And so for the rest of us, we will now move forward together into our shared sacred space. And as we cross the threshold now into our shared sacred space, I'll just remind everyone, myself included, of the 4 principles we would try our best to observe to maintain our sacred space together. Confidentiality / anonymization, no fear, threat, or control, no tough love, no fixing, no interventions, no commerce, no recommendations, and no expectation of participation. All right. Welcome back to our shared sacred space for the month of November. Okay, so our topic for this session is how to recover your bliss after you lose it. So in this month's session, in my brainstorm call with Gary, my editor, who selects the story for every session, and then she reads it to me, and I brainstorm and I give her notes. Right? We came across a Chinese folktale that led us to a reflection on how and why we end up losing our bliss even after we attain it. And then after we lose it, how to restore our connection to it, right? If you gain your bliss and lose it, that's not the end of the story. It's circumambulatory. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So what is the mechanism by which we lose it and then regain it again? So I'll ask Gary to now come on screen. We will have her read her story to us, and then we'll just follow the golden thread laid out by the story and see where it takes us. So Gary, if you're there, come on up on screen. Hello. I cannot hear you nor see you, but you are taking up the correct half of the screen. Your video just went down and came back up, and it's the same. Gary, I'm going to try and re-invite you. Oops. It's so normal for us. There you are.
Oh, okay, great.
Oh, I can hear you and see you perfectly. Welcome back.
Brilliant, thank you.
All right.
Hey.
Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And so, do you want to tell us about the story you picked for the session?
Yeah, so this one is like this one of these classic fairy tales from Andrew Lang collection. I love Andrew Lang collection. It's just there's so many classic fairy tales that you get from there, but they're also very some of them are very rare, forgotten, unheard, but also
Mm,
quirky little fairy tales from across the world. So it's
mm,
like there's just so much wealth in those fairy tales. I just love that collection. So I keep going back
mm,
over and over if I can't find anything. Um, like typically, what happens is, when I'm going about my day and something comes up in the form of a conversation or a movie scene that I'm
mm,
watching, or it might be someone making a metaphorical reference to something,
mm.
and a phrase or something kind of catches my ear, and I go, that reminds me of this story, and maybe I should kind of go and read that again, and
Yeah,
that
that
maybe that's
happened with Snow White last month. All right.
yeah, that happened with Snow White last month, right? So that happens, or if I'm reading something and I catch a reference that really resonates with me, then I go exploring it and find a story.
Mm,
Um, but if I don't find anything like that, I just go back to Andrew Lang. Right? Like
mm.
I just pick up a book and start flipping through the pages to see what I can find.
I
And this
love it.
was those stories. It's called The Nightingale,
Okay.
and
Yep.
um, and yeah, it's just molded in a fashion of a classic fairy tale, but
Mm.
it's just so quirky and comical in bits, and like adorable in some parts, but it's just a lovely story. It's a classical myth, I think.
And super juicy for our purposes.
Yeah.
Will you read
So
us the story?
sure, okay, let me go. So it's called The Nightingale,
Okay.
right? And it starts with the Emperor of China.
Mm,
So the Emperor of China, who had this very grand palace, which was like the most splendid palace in all of the world, everything made of priceless porcelain, so brittle, so delicate that you had to really take care how you touched it. And the palace garden was one of the most beautiful gardens in the world. I had most beautiful flowers, and they had all of these loveliest tiny silver bells tied to those flowers. I mean, the gardener took so much care to decorate even those flowers, and they tinkled as you passed them. Right, you couldn't help but look at the flowers, and everything in the emperor's garden was so beautifully arranged, with a perfect view. And the garden was so large that even the gardener who tended to the whole garden, right? Even the gardener did not know where it ended. But if you ever got beyond the garden, you came to a huge forest with, great trees and deep lakes inside it. And then the forest itself sloped down to the sea, a clear blue sea, and you could see large ships sailing. And in these trees, like bordering the forest and looking out into the ocean, right? These were the trees where there was a nightingale. Now, she sang so beautifully that even poor fishermen, right? And the fisherman who came there every day, he had so much to do, um, so much work spread out through the day. But even he would stand for a while, listen to the song, and then he would listen to it again when he came at night to cast his nets. And every time he'd go, how beautiful this is. And then he would have to attend to his work. He'd forget all about the bird. But every day, the next day at the same time, the next evening at the same time, he would stop by and listen to the nightingale. It was just that beautiful. And not just the fishermen. There were people, travelers, who would come from all over the world, from different countries, to the emperor's kingdom. And they would be, astonished at the palace, the garden, They would stop to admire everything in their town. But when they heard the nightingale, they all said, "This is the finest thing of all." Right? And so the travelers who went back told all about it when they went home. They talked about the palace, they talked about the garden, but they also always remembered to talk about the nightingale. And she was praised the most. There were books written on the emperor's kingdom and the palace and the garden, and even those mentioned the nightingale. And so the poets composed verses on the nightingale in the forest by the deep sea. And these books, were circulated all over the world, and some of them reached the emperor. And the emperor, as he sat on his golden throne, loved to have these books read to him, and he would nod his head every minute when he heard all these, narrations of beautiful things in his kingdom. And he loved them all. And by the time he reached the part where the nightingale was praised, he'd be like, "Wait a minute. What do they mean the nightingale is better than all? Like what is that? I don't know anything about the nightingale. What kind of bird is that? Is there such a bird in my empire? And I've not even heard of it, right? So what is this bird, and why am I reading about it for the first time in a book?" And so he called his minister. And this, minister is typically a man of, very high rank, very proud, and, very sure of himself. And the emperor said to him, "Here's this most remarkable bird called the nightingale. And they say it's the most glorious thing in my kingdom. And I've never heard of it. Why haven't you told me about it?" And the minister was equally puzzled. He said, "That's because I've never heard of it. But I'll go out and look for it. We'll find out, where is this bird to be found?" And so the minister ran up and down the stairs, all over the halls and corridors of the palace, the court, and he kept asking everyone if they had met the nightingale, if they'd heard of the nightingale, and nobody had ever heard anything about it. And so he went back to the emperor, and he told him, "Oh, this must be just an invention, You can't believe everything that's written in the books. Maybe they just made up stuff." Right? And then the emperor told him, "Well, I've read it in many books. It's not just one book. It's not just one person making things up, right? Many people have said, and everything else they've written about the palace and the garden is true. So this can't be the only thing that's untrue. And so I order that you must find the nightingale by evening and invite her over to dinner to my court." And so now the minister was, he had an ultimatum, right? So he had to work fast, and he had to somehow find out what this was about. So he went around asking everyone about this wonderful nightingale. And finally, all the courtiers, went about looking for it. They met a poor little girl in the kitchen. And this kitchen maid, right? She said, "Oh, I know the nightingale. Oh, she sings beautifully. And I hear her every night. I carry some scraps from the kitchen, from the court kitchen, at night when I go back home to my poor sick mother. And sometimes I'm very tired, so I just sit down in the woods for a little. And then I hear the nightingale singing. And it's just so beautiful. It brings tears to my eyes. And it's like my mother's kissing me. That's how beautiful it is. So I know where to find her." And so the minister says, "Kitchen maid, you're our savior today, right?" So he says, "Okay, kitchen maid, you are now promoted to the kitchen cook, right? The royal cook. And you have permission to see the emperor at dinner. if you can find us, this nightingale, you can lead us to the nightingale in the forest, because we're going to invite her to come to court this evening. And so the kitchen maid took them, right? Took all the courtiers. They were all curious to find where this nightingale was. And so they went into the forest. And while they were there on the way, they heard a cow mooing. And immediately the courtiers went, "Oh, we found her, we found her. What a wonderful power in her voice. I mean, she must be a small thing, but look how loud she is." And the kitchen maid said, "No, that's a cow mooing. We're still a long way off." Right? And so they kept going, and they heard a few frogs, croaking in the marsh. And the chaplain said, "Oh, splendid. I think we hear her now. It sounds just like a church bell." And so the kitchen maid went, No. Those are frogs. We still have a long way to go." And presently they came to a point where she stopped and said, "We should hear her any time now." And the nightingale began to sing. And the girl immediately pointed it out and said, "There she is. She's sitting there." And the courtiers all looked up, and they find this little dull gray-brown bird up the branches. I mean, it's nothing to look at, right? And the minister goes, "I mean, who should have thought it? She looks so ordinary, right? I mean, she seems like she's lost all her feathers, seeing so many distinguished people from the royal court." And the kitchen maid called out to her and said, "Little nightingale, our gracious emperor wants you to sing before him." And the nightingale started to sing and said, "Oh, with the greatest of pleasure," because the nightingale thought that the emperor was among the crowd, right? And she started to sing. And the minister was like, "Oh, look at her little throat. It's so beautiful. She sounds just like glass bells. It's wonderful." And the nightingale goes, "Shall I sing once more for the emperor?" And the minister said, "Oh, we actually came to invite you to the court this evening where the emperor will be, and we would love to have you sing to him." And the nightingale went, "Well, it sounds best in the woods, but because the emperor wishes it, I'll gladly come." Right? And that evening, the palace was beautifully prepared for this grand event. The walls and floors glittered. There was 1,000 gold lamps. There was beautiful flowers arranged everywhere. And the bells jingled, and there was murmur in the courts, and everybody was waiting for this amazing event, right? And in the center of the great hall was the emperor on his golden throne. And they had prepared a beautiful golden perch for the nightingale. And the nightingale came. The whole court was there. The little kitchen maid was also allowed to come to the court. Everyone was dressed in their best. And everyone was looking at this little gray bird. And the emperor nodded. And the nightingale started singing. And it sang so beautifully that the tears came into the emperor's eyes. And they started running down his cheeks. And the nightingale kept singing. And it went straight to everybody's hearts. Everyone was so delighted. The emperor was so delighted that he then moved to put on a gold ring around the neck of the bird. And the nightingale thanked him and said, "I've already had my reward. I don't want the gold ring. I have seen tears in the emperor's eyes. That is a great reward. An emperor's tears have such power." And then she went on to sing again with this beautiful voice. And everyone was completely enchanted. And this nightingale was a real success. And so she had to stay at court now. She had her own cage. And, she had these silk strings fastened around her leg. And she was given permission to walk out twice in the day, once at night. And she had 12 servants. there was not much pleasure flying about in the palace, but now she was a royal nightingale. And the whole town talked about this wonderful bird. Everybody had asked each other in the town, have you heard the nightingale? Have you heard the nightingale? And so one day, the emperor received a large parcel on which was written the nightingale. And so the emperor thought, oh, this must be another new book written about our famous bird. But it wasn't a book. It was a little mechanical toy. It was an artificial nightingale. It was just like the real one, except it had diamonds and rubies and sapphires set all over. And it had a key, it could be wound up. And it would sing the piece that the real bird sang. And it would move its tail up and down, and it glittered because it had gold and silver and diamonds. And it had a little collar around its neck where it was written, the nightingale of the Emperor of Japan is nothing compared to that of the Emperor of China. And everybody said, oh, this is magnificent, right? This is beautiful. And the man who brought this clockwork bird was given the title Bringer of the Imperial First Nightingale. And so the emperor said, now we must have both the nightingales sing together. I will have a beautiful duet. And so they sang together, but the voices didn't blend. For the real nightingale had her own way of singing, and the clockwork bird had its own rhythm. And the bandmaster who brought the clockwork bird said, oh, it's not its fault. It keeps very good time. And I've made sure personally that it's perfect. And so the artificial bird had to sing alone. And it was delightful. It gave as much pleasure as the real one. It was beautiful, but it was also so much prettier to look at because it had all these, sparkling gems and stones and gold and silver, right? And it sang the same piece 33 times without being tired. Like people would say, oh, we'd like to hear that again. And the emperor would like to hear that again. And it would just repeat the same song over and over, never get tired, right? And after 33 times, the emperor turned around and said, oh, I'd like to hear the living nightingale sing now. But she wasn't there. No one had noticed that she had flown out of the open window and gone back to the forest. Oh, what shall we do? Said the emperor, and the whole court scolded the nightingale, and they were very upset over this. They said the nightingale was very ungrateful. But it's okay, we still have the best bird, right? So the artificial bird had to sing again, on the 34th time, the same piece. And the bandmaster who brought the bird, praised it and said it was the best bird ever. And he assured them it was better than the real nightingale, right? Not just because it was prettier, but, it never tired. And so this was now the imperial nightingale, right? And now the bird had permission to go into the bedchamber of the emperor and sing to him at night. And the real nightingale was banished from the kingdom. Right? There was a royal decree. And the artificial bird was put on, silk cushions by the emperor's bed. It got all presents and, gifts all around it. And it was even given the title of Imperial Night Singer. So the emperor would listen to it while going to sleep every night, over and over again. And so this went on for a few months, for a whole year, right? And one day, as the artificial bird was singing, something snapped inside and all the wheels ran down and the music just stopped. And the emperor got up and worried. What happened? He had his royal physician summoned, but what could the physician do? I mean, this is not a live bird, right? So the clockmaker was summoned, And he came and he did a great deal of examining and checking. And he put the bird somewhat in order, right? It started to sing again. But he said, it had worked too much. So it would be impossible to kind of replace the parts and put in new ones. So you would just have to be very careful and not tax the bird too much. So it would have to sing only once in a while, played only once. It couldn't do the whole 33, 34 times without tiring anymore. All the parts inside had worn out. And so, that was a bummer. And the emperor was sad. But that was that. There was nothing he could do. And as the months and years went on, the emperor started to fall sick, right? And then finally, he was just relegated to his bed. He wouldn't move. He wouldn't speak. And the whole court thought he was dead. But, he just lived on, and everybody would come once in a day to kind of pay their respects to the emperor. But there's nothing they could do. And the kingdom couldn't go on without anyone ruling it, right? So they chose a new emperor. And slowly, the visits started to drop. Like, people wouldn't go to see what the old emperor was doing or how he was. Was he okay? Was he fine? Was he dead? Was he alive? Nobody bothered after a while. And so the old emperor was just, there was this monotony until he died. He was just waiting for death. But at the same time, he longed for company. Said if only someone would speak to him, if only someone would sing to him. What would he not give for some music? The music would just break the spell lying on him. And he would just want someone to sing. And at that moment, he remembered, the real Nightingale. He said, "Oh, dear bird, sing. I gave you gold, I gave you jewels, and I hung my gold ring round your neck. And, I'd do anything." And then suddenly he heard the song of the nightingale in the silent night. And it came from outside the window. It was this, glorious burst of song. It was the real living nightingale. And immediately, as soon as the song came to him, and the song of comfort and song of hope, the blood flowed quicker and quicker in the emperor's limbs, and life began to return. And the emperor was overjoyed. He said, thank you, you divine little bird. Thank you so much for saving me. I chased you from my kingdom, and you've given me life again. How can I reward you? And the nightingale said, well, you've done that already. I brought tears to your eyes the first time I sang, and I will never forget that. Right? But now you should sleep and get strong again, and I'll sing you a lullaby. And it went into song again. And the emperor fell into this deep, calm sleep. And the next morning, none of his servants had still come back because, they all thought either he was almost dead or actually dead. So the next morning, the nightingale sat and sang again. And the emperor said, you must always stay with me. Please stay with me. And I don't want the artificial bird anymore. I'll break it into 1,000 pieces. It's of no use to me now. But please, I would like you to stay with me. And the nightingale said, don't do that, right? The artificial bird did his work as long as he could. Keep him as you've done. And as for me, I can't build my nest in the palace. I can't live in the palace. But let me come whenever I like. I will sit in the evening on the tree outside the window. I will sing to you, right? I'll sing the songs that make you feel happy, make you feel grateful. I'll sing you songs of joy, of sorrow, of evil and good. And, I'll come and go as I please. Because, I want to fly around to the poor fisherman's hut, to the farmer's cottage, to the forest, to the sea. And I want to sing to all those who are in your court, but also are far away from you. And I love your heart more than your crown. Although your crown also is bright and holy. But I have to sing to everyone, right? So I'll sing to you again. And I'll come and go. I'll keep singing. But you must promise me one thing. And the emperor was just so happy that the nightingale was back again. So he said, I promise anything. I'd give you anything you ask. Right? And as he was saying this, the emperor stood up and put on his imperial robes, and he was basically back on his feet again. And he said, ask me anything. And the nightingale said, one thing, I beg of you, don't tell anyone that you have a little bird who tells you everything. It'll be much better that way. And saying that, the nightingale flew away. And by this time, the servants came in to look at, their dead emperor. And the emperor turned around and said, good morning. So that's the story. Artie, are you there? Hi.
Whew. Thank you for reading that again. I feel I always get an extra treat because I get to hear you read the story twice.
Yeah.
The last part this time really zinged me. The part about to not tell anyone about all this.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it. So let me start with my usual question, which is, where do you enter into this story?
So the first time I read this, right, for me, it's like I had tears in my eyes, like the emperor. And it kind of, we've done these motifs so many times now. We've done these symbols of the bird so many times that instinctively I kind of knew this was about the muse.
Yes.
And the way the bird talks in the story, right? There is this beautiful manner of authority, and at the same time a manner of compassion, which kind of is very, very resonant with how the muse speaks.
Beautifully
right? So
put.
it was like, for me, yeah, this is the muse,
Yeah.
right? But we've done stories of similar themes before. We've done Bird of Truth, and I'll drop the links in a while. Done Bird of Truth, where there was a similar theme where the emerging masculine had to go and find this bird, right? And also the theme of the false bird versus the true bird, and it comes up in that story. And then there's the waiting maid's parrot. That was a Chinese story as well. So we've done this in the past. So that felt like, and it's a funny thing for me. My bias in the first few months until recently was to go and find new symbols and new motifs.
Right.
New. So if I found something familiar, I'd be like, okay, what more can I find?
Right.
Is there something fresh? But now, every time I come across something familiar, I'm like, I actually lean towards it, because I feel like I want to circumambulate on this path again
And go even deeper into it. Yeah.
and go even deeper into it. I want to see what more can the same symbol tell me,
Right.
like what deeper insight I can find this time when I'm going on that path. So that's how I felt when I read this story. I was like, okay, I know this is the Muse, but I want to know what she's trying to tell me this time.
I mean, there's an old thing that says, these archetypes are inexhaustible
Mm-hmm.
because they are of the, other realm, of the archetypal realm.
Yeah.
So you squeeze them and it's like this bellows that just keeps producing, which is, I mean, it's a feature, not a flaw, right? It's like fabulous that reality is like this. But also it's why these myths and fairy tales can be brought out again and again, can be retold, right? So the hero's journey from Gilgamesh all the way up to Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
It's the same pattern being told and told again, but each time you tell it, it's new. Like the archetype stamps itself into an archetype, into the actual world. And each time it's like this brilliant new thing, but the underlying pattern is the same. And the energy is just as fresh and just as nourishing and rejuvenating. It's,
Yeah.
I know the world is just unbelievable. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, so for me that was the thing. I wanted to go into the theme of the bird and the muse and song and bird song. We've had that as well before. This very unique song, which you can reproduce like with an artificial bird, but there's still something missing. Like one of the things I missed out in I remember in the story was, when everybody comes to listen to that artificial bird, right? And they just can't sing together. The two birds can't sing together. There is this detail where the fisherman comes to the court and he listens to the artificial bird sing. And he goes, "Oh, this is delightful. This is very nice. But there's something missing.
Something's off.
Yeah, something is off."
Yeah.
So he says that, but he doesn't bother too much. It's like, "Oh, but it's pretty, all right. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong, but it's just, yeah, it's just not like the real one." So there is that thing which is, you can't put a finger on it, but when you know, right?
Right.
So that feeling of, and you get this sense when you've spoken to your muse or you've listened to your muse for a while, and this takes practice. Initially, when you start interacting with your muse, you're not sure, are you hearing the muse or is this me making up voices in my head, right? But you give it time and you give it practice and you start hearing this very distinct voice, and you start to get familiar with it. It's very clear, and after that there's you don't mistake it for anything else, right? The quality of that, the voice and what it says, and so that is something that you just can't put a finger on. You don't know how to explain it, but it's the muse's voice. It's a real Nightingale's voice, and you can't fake it. You can't make copies of it.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the story. When you read it, I was just like, there's so much here that we've already talked about.
Yeah.
And we've said this over and over again over the couple of years we've been doing these sessions, but it's like we go into West African, East African, we go into Persian stories, we go into Native American, Aboriginal, Indian folk tales from the forest, from from the north, from the south, Northern European Grimm's brothers fairy tales, Chinese, Japanese, and in all these different traditions, similar images keep coming up, and the physics of how the different symbols interact are shockingly consistent, right? And it's because these archetypes arise out of our biology, right? Even if birds on either side of the world never talk to each other, they all have beaks, they have feathers, they have wings, they lay eggs. And in exactly the same way, human beings, right? We have a bliss that we lose. It's this constant, tug of like the village realm versus the forest realm, right? The village is like everyone is into everybody's business. There's like eyes everywhere. There's social sort of standards, expectations. And if you don't follow those expectations, punishment is swift, right? And then there's the edge of the village, and then there's the forest, which is a completely different sort of realm of physics. And it's up to each human being to choose, like, are they village, are they forest, are they a mix of both, do they go back and forth? And this is a human thing. It arises out of our biology. It doesn't matter what culture you're in. If you're a human being, you're going to need to deal with these questions, and these myths all come up to help us navigate those things, right? And so I agree. The bird is your muse. The song she sings is your bliss, right? And so to me, this is a story about finding your bliss and muse and then losing it, and then how you get it back, right? So it has a lot of physics around how we interact with our muses. Just listening to how the bird talks through the story. If you re-listen to Gary's telling the story with an ear for, whatever the nightingale says is the muse, you will learn about how the muse talks to you. And Gary and I will just, authenticate. It's like, it's beautifully precise and consistent. So in diving into the story, we could spend like a week-long retreat just on the story, right? I'm going to just touch on the themes I feel like we've already covered in past sessions. As I go, Gary will drop links in case you want to go down those rabbit holes and go deep into them. So I'll kind of fly over that and then kind of dive into the more interesting stuff. And related back to what I said at the beginning of the session, before we set our sacred space, the reason why, because Gary could easily give like a 5-minute version of the story and just gloss over all this detail, right? And the reason we like to read the full story is that for different people, you may enter into the story at different points. So we try to give the extra texture and detail. So if you find yourself really glomming onto the part where like the court ministers were like mistaking the cow for the muse and mistaking the frog for the muse, right? And then we mentioned, oh yeah, that is related to this other story. You might want to sort of click into that session and go deep into that. Because if that's resonating for you, that is the thing that is reflecting a current archetype in your life that's very active and lit up and running things. So we try to give that extra surface area. It makes for a longer session, but we try to give that extra surface area for you to find the thing that is zinging for you, and then you can go down deep. So anyway, for this story, the bird for me is a symbol of your muse. The song she sings is your bliss. The bird in general is also a symbol of the spirit and the air, right? Because the air is the realm of the spirit. But she's also an animal. So animals in dreams are symbols of embodiment from the neck down. And the cow and the frog are the same. So the fact that the courtiers go through the cow and the frog without recognizing what is what is a symbol of the king, which is like your, we'll talk about what the king means, but it's your conscious, your ego, what you think is real, what you think matters. It is sort of the realm of the profane. And this kingly realm is completely disembodied. It's in the realm of ideas, intellect, abstraction, transcendence, and not in touch with the body animal side of it. Well, it can't even tell the difference between a cow and a frog and a bird, right? Let alone what is the bliss and the muse. So we start off in the initial position in the story, where one part of the kingdom that's nominally running things is completely not in touch with the rest of your deep self. Okay. The king's palace and the garden. So there's three realms: the garden, the forest, and the ocean, the seashore, right? The king's palace and garden realm are realms of prestige and fear, threat, and control. Everything is manicured. Things can't grow wildly as they would like. Everything's shaped into like, topiary and the hedges are shaped like rabbits and everything's beautiful. The flowers can't just be flowers; they have to have bells on them, because apparently just being a flower is not enough, right? And this theme of the kingly realm, uh, being the realm of prestige, ambition, fear, threat, and control, getting ahead, ranking, hierarchy, is found in a lot of mythopoetic traditions around the world. The example that jumps out at me is the Celtic tradition, and in particular the Arthurian mythic cycle. Right, so Arthur, whom I'm named after, right? Artie is short for Arthur. The court of Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, right? The Holy Grail, the Quest for the Grail, the Fisher King, all of those stories. Gawain, Galahad, the Green Knight. So Arthur is a realm. The court of Arthur, typically in this cycle, is a realm of career, ambition, honor, and prestige. Right? And you go to the realm of Arthur to prove your worth, to get your seat at the table, to advance your career, to fulfill your ambition. But that is also exactly where you go to lose touch with the Grail. The Grail is the Nightingale. The Grail is your Muse. The Grail is a feminine, the cup, sort of the womb, sort of container. That in the Arthurian cycle heals everything. The Grail heals every wound imaginable. Okay, just like the Nightingale. But when you go to the king's court, the Grail isn't there. That's why the knights have to go out and quest for the Grail. And the stories of which knights make it and which knights don't, what they do and don't do, that is basically an operating manual of how you find the Grail and the do's and don'ts of what you do and don't do when you're going after the Grail, when you're going after your bliss. And bliss is the thing that heals everything within you. People are like, should I heal first or do my bliss first? I was like, just flip a coin or go wherever your gut is telling you to go. You will end up in the same place anyway. Because as you find your bliss, you'll realize the main blockages are these wounds that are keeping you back. Right? So if you start with healing, you'll start healing the wounds, and then you'll be done and you'll be like, well, what do I do next? And then all your board members will be like, well, let's go get our bliss. So each leads into the other. So the realm of the Grail, the realm of the Nightingale, is the realm of the sacred, the realm devoid of fear, threat, and control. The quest for the Grail, the quest for the Nightingale, has to be outside of the garden. Right? The fact that you have to go out looking for it tells you something about the nature of your initial position where you are. Right? We have to go not where we are now in order to find the Grail, in order to find the Nightingale, which means where you are now, thinking you're the center of the world, you're the king running everything. That is exactly where the Grail is not. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to quest for it. Right? So you're like, oh, I need to heal. I need to find my bliss. Well, one thing that implies is that you are not finding your bliss where you are now. And for some people, that's like, well, that's just normal life. Just, keep calm and carry on, smile and get on with it. And they continue on and take another million years to start finding their bliss. For other people, it hits them in a different way. They're like, wait, so I'm living, I'm working my ass off, I'm paying the mortgage, I'm doing all these things. And where I am has none of my bliss. And for a certain person, it hits you like, WTF? What is the point of all this anyway? And it hits them like a fire alarm, and their hair is on fire, and they start to find their bliss. And, all the different shades in between. So the king's realm, the one you are conscious to, And the story lays it out. All the detail gives you these insights. It's a manicured part, the garden, rooted in your body in nature, because it's actual plants that are growing. But you cut it to look a certain way. It doesn't look like itself. And it's a part that appears endless and infinite, like it's actually everything. The gardener doesn't even know there's anything beyond. The gardener cannot find the edges of the garden. Right? But we know beyond it, there's the forest realm, which typically represents in these fairy tales the realm of the unexplored self. But even beyond the unexplored self, there's a third realm, which is the seashore and the ocean. So out beyond where you think the limit of you is all the unexplored you. And then beyond the unexplored you, that's where your bliss resides. Right? So
It's
the known
interesting
self
that,
versus, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it's interesting that you brought up, the Arthurian legend, where, the Nightingale is like the Holy Grail, and
Yes.
it has the healing power. And suddenly the image that came to me was the emperor, when he falls sick, is lying on the bed, and he's neither dead nor alive. And that's so reminiscent of the Grail King, who had this mortal wound and, too ill to live, but he
And
wouldn't
yet
die.
unable to die.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
the emperor is just like the Grail King, and then, only when the Nightingale comes back does he come back to life. So that's just another image that just popped up.
Absolutely right. And the Arthurian cycle is a Celtic tradition. This story from Andrew Lang is a Chinese story.
Yeah.
Right? Couldn't be farther. And you can make story, the Silk Road and the stories were carried over. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
A lot of things were carried over. Many of them didn't stick. Right? The reason, so you could say it's diffusion, or you could say it's spontaneous sort of arisal. Right? So it's like saying, oh, I have a nose, 2 ears, and a mouth. Was this from diffusion? I learned this from the Chinese, or I learned this from the Celts. It's like, no, it's because I'm human. Right? So this King Grail and King Nightingale thing arises out of our human condition, and it's just reflected in two different ways in these two different traditions. And when you look at the details, it is stunning. And the reason we like to find these parallels is because it is validating. It's like, okay, if this story is resonating with you, it is a thing. It's very old. It's not just you. You're not crazy. And also, when you read through the story, it gives you hints on how to navigate through. That's why it's so comforting and healing. So because of the physics of the story, I don't want to get too into jewel-encrusted bird mode and formalize it and interpret it too much, right? And I don't want to give it too much of a formulaic structure. Like people will instantly say, well, is a bird my inner child, or is it like Jungian archetypes? And so when we get too formulaic, we get into jewel-encrusted mechanical bird. It reminds me of that Zen saying, don't put legs on a snake. Right? You look at a snake, it has no legs, you think it's broken, and you start trying to fix it. And it's like, no, the snake is just fine. It moves just fine. Over formulatizing things ends up obscuring them even more. So let's just observe the pattern and see what we can see. So the bird is this muse-like figure. The song it sings feels like your bliss because it heals you, it rises you up, it brings tears to your eyes, which we'll get to, the symbolism of that. But she looks very plain. It doesn't mean she is plain.
Yeah.
Right? What does it mean that the bird looks very plain? To the courtiers, who apparently can't even tell the difference between a frog and a cow. But they can tell when something is, oh so last year's fashion. Right? All they know is prestige and how to critique and pull things down. So this gives you a secret about what the muse is. When you look for her, she is not exotic and flashy and jewel encrusted. It's something familiar, right under your nose, something you see all the time. It's not an eagle or a peacock. It's like a pigeon in New York City or London, right? What do we say about pigeons in cities, right? Now, to me, if you have never seen a pigeon before, this thing is splendid. It's a million different shades of gray. Around its neck, it has this iridescent kind of, glimmer. It makes this beautiful sound like a dove. And when it flaps, it has a very distinctive sound of the flapping, right? It's not just gray. It's a million different shades of gray, right? If you think a pigeon is just gray, you're blind, right? So what has happened when you think it looks normal or plain is that you have lost your eyes to see, right? So when I was like an undergrad at Harvard, like many moons ago, I went to Harvard. I grew up in New York City in Manhattan. And on the East Coast of the United States, we have these squirrels, right? These brown, sort of gray squirrels, always hustling, getting peanuts with the long, fluffy tails. And these would be the most common things. We were just like looking at them going like, oh, they just get them out of the way, go away. And as we would walk across Harvard Yard, like, in the morning, hungover, stumbling to our morning classes, we would marvel that there are all these foreign tourists, like these Japanese tourists that are fascinated by these squirrels. They're like taking pictures, doing selfies with the squirrels. And we're just like, what are they doing? It's just this nasty squirrel. And it was funny to us, but it's like what had happened was the tourists had eyes to see. And we, as these bleary-eyed heart, I mean, all you're thinking about, when you're there is, oh my God, like my grades and my next paper and my schedule's so packed. We had lost our eyes to see.
Yeah, so that I can resonate with that, because when I was in California about 5 years ago, I think, I had the same thing. I would see these ground squirrels, I think they're called.
It's the
They're all
same
over
squirrel, yeah.
the same squirrel, and we don't see them here, right? Our squirrels are slightly different. They're tree squirrels, and they're extremely, extremely skittish and nervous. But these were like, they would walk up to us and sniff our hands to see if we have something to give them, right?
Absolutely.
And I realized after a while, I was the only one running after them. And people around were like, nobody gave them a second look. And I was, photographing them all the time. And there was this moment where I remember this was just outside Hearst Castle. We'd just gone to see Hearst Castle. And then there's a point where there are rocks, and then you kind of look at the sea on the other side. And there was these two squirrels sitting on the rocks and looking out into the sea and just sitting there watching and looking at the sea. And I was like, that is just so beautiful. I mean, I've never seen squirrels meditating, looking out to the sea.
Yeah.
And there was nobody looking at that. I was like, who do I show this to? I have to show this to someone.
If anything, the weird curiosity is you chasing the squirrels around.
Yeah. So I can relate to the Japanese tourists.
So to me, this is a hint, like the plainness of the Nightingale is a hint from the story that your muse is all around you. Right? When in the story, it places her geographically out beyond the garden, beyond the forest, at the edge of the ocean. It's not that you have to travel 1,000 miles to see her. It's just that mentally you have lost your eyes to see. She's actually on your shoulder right next to you, but it may as well be that far away. Right? So in this comical story, the circumambulation of engaging with your muse, your bliss, which is what the muse brings in the form of song, the whole story of this Nightingale is basically like a recipe book of what to do and what not to do. Okay. So I want to talk about this deep, unexplored ocean realm, out even beyond the unexplored forest realm, where the fishermen pull fish out of the water. And the fact that this is where the Nightingale hangs out. What does this mean? So in the Celtic tradition, there is an exact parallel to this. When the Fisher King is, ravaged by this like incurable, agonizing wound, basically of castration, right? where there is no generativity, there is no next version, there is no fruitfulness and abundance. The only thing that gives him any comfort is to fish, right, in the moat lake in front of his castle. The attendants carry him out on his stretcher, row him out to the middle, and he sits there and he fishes. And every now and then he pulls up a fish, typically a salmon. And the pulling of this up relieves his pain. He doesn't even eat it, right? He just the act of pulling something up. So fish is a symbol of insight. So when you pull an insight up from the depths, it's like meditation. When you sit long enough, you start getting downloads and insights, because the water becomes still and you can see right through to the bottom. Okay. So fishing is a symbol of bringing up spiritual insight and being nourished by them. Even in the Catholic tradition, the Pope has the mitres hat, which has the notch on top. Basically, it's a salmon head. He has the ring that is like the fisherman's ring. Little fish you see on bumper stickers sometimes. This is all the same symbology. So the nightingale hangs out where your inner fishermen are. The nightingale is completely proximate to where you pull up insight, right? The muse sings to your fishermen within you, the song of your bliss. The fishermen, and Gary said in the story, they're really busy, but they do this anyway. They still take time to listen to the song. They listen to the song, they pull up fish. They listen to the song, they pull up more fish, right? This is not an accident logistically in the story. And then the comedy of the courtiers going out from the garden, and notice the king never leaves the garden, right? They think a cow is their bliss. They think a frog is their bliss. Now, they're not technically wrong. Once you hear the song of the nightingale, you hear its essence in all songs, right? Like enlightenment. The joke here, though, is that the courtiers, from the realm of prestige, fear, threat, and control, the profane, their palate is so primitive, they can't discern, right, chalk from cheese. They can't discern cow from frog from nightingale. If you grow up in a family where everybody works for money and prestige, in the US, the tax form is called a W-2 form, right? That's just the name of the form. You have these stories of like these brothers who are both sales guys. They'll come in together over Thanksgiving and they'll compare W-2s, and the father will compare his W-2 to see who scored more that year, who made more money that year, right? And if that's the kind of family you grew up in, right, everybody works for money and prestige, you don't even know what bliss feels like. You're like, what is even bliss? What are you talking about, right? And I say, well, that's not a cow, that's a nightingale. And you're like, who cares? Is this going to help me make my quarterly number or not? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't think so. It's like, well, don't waste my time.
It reminds me in the meditation study groups that we did, you would say this at the time, because in meditation you touch on the topic of the ocean of bliss, right? How do you experience the ocean of bliss in sitting meditation, or when you go past the 40-minute session in a meditation? Yes. So how you experience bliss and what it tastes like, what it feels like, and you had said that when we did the study group, is one of the benefits of tasting the ocean of bliss in a meditation is that if you know what that tastes like, it's easier for you to recognize it in your everyday routine when you want to find your bliss.
Yes.
Then when you come across your bliss, you can kind of compare notes and see if that's what that is like. So it's a useful data point to kind of have that, that's your reference point. So if you, like you said, if you've never actually had it modeled in your life, your parents have never experienced that kind of bliss in their work. If going after bliss has not been a thing in your community, in your society, you're completely disconnected from it. How do you even know? How do you recognize it? Right. How do you tell what's your bliss, right? And this was a useful point of reference. So
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I think that's one of the reasons we do sessions like this publicly, openly, for free and everything, because it's like many of us have grown up in families where bliss was not modeled at all.
yeah.
And so when we come to like a sacred space session like this, you get a taste for it. Like I can't tell you how many people have said, now that I've experienced sacred space, right, online in a retreat or whatever, when I go back into my regular work world, I see it everywhere, right? I realize I'm like soaking in an environment during my work time at the office or on Zoom or whatever. 99% of everything is fear, threat, and control. And now that I see it and I'm tasting for the sacred and it's not there, everything's like bitter. My tolerance for it has gone way down. I'm like, because you realize like this is normal, and it sucks. and instead, and you just like, I mean, once you know what good food tastes like, you go back to eating junk food, and you're like, I can see why this can be addictive, but at the same time, it's like, uh, can I do better than this? And you start to find places where you can get good food and like it's free or it doesn't cost a lot, and you optimize your life. So that's why, doing these sacred space sessions is so, I don't know, it's just meaningful. So another sort of clue, pro tip from the story of what not to do. When they find the nightingale, instead of bringing the king to the ocean, they bring the bird to the king. Right? It's like flashing red light. Pull up, get out, don't do that. And she gives the hint. She's not like, oh, that's beneath me, I'm not going to do that. Bring his ass over to me. She's like, I mean, if you really want me to go, I'll go, but I'll just tell you, it sounds better in the forest.
Yeah.
Right? That's the clue. And the way she delivers it is the clue. That's the way the muse tells you. She's like, yeah, I mean, it's probably better if you, Artie, if you keep teaching this and doing it on your own, and you don't take the contract with, I don't know, Google or Facebook to like provide sacred space as a perk to their employees. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll consider it. And you sign up anyway. And then months later, you're like, oh my gosh, that was a bad idea, right?
Yeah.
So she goes to the king. She revitalizes the court, obviously. And then what do? We tie her down. We put her in a cage. All right. Every rock star, every artist starts in a little room singing just what you want to sing, because you don't know what people, nobody cares. Nobody knows you. So you just sing what you like to sing. And then you're discovered, the money starts coming in, the prestige starts coming in. And then you start worrying about losing it. And then you start pandering to the crowd. You go to the court and you start singing what the king wants you to sing, instead of singing what you want to sing, staring out at the ocean with the squirrels, right? And then you lose your magic. Right? And all these rock stars and artists, they need to like go out into the desert, and they stop, they get off social media, they just, and try to find their magic again. They try to find their nightingale again. You see this mistake over and over again, but that's the pattern. It's almost comical, or how on cue people's lives are when they go through these patterns and the events in the story. And then even more blatant, right? This story is like, it's laying it out for you in crayon. The Emperor of Japan, okay, sends the mechanical bird, which looks beautiful. It's jewel encrusted. That gives you what? Control, reliability, predictability, all the things the world of the profane loves, all the things the world of fear, threat, and control love. And around its neck, a plaque saying, this is the inferior bird.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a trick or a trap trying to deceive you. Nothing is hidden. It's all out there in plain sight. It sings when you want it to, and it does not tire. It's dead, but it's pretty. This is the inferior bird. It's all about prestige. But then, like the rock star and like the king, this is the one you cling to. Because it gives you some of the juice of bliss, but it also gives you all the money and prestige and reliability, control, predictability of the court. And you lose the real bird. The real bird literally flies out the window. Your real bliss out the window.
Yeah.
And because of its inferior nourishment, because it's a dead thing, not an alive thing, the bird eventually falls apart, and then you fall apart. Okay. Then, if you're lucky, the emperor has a realization on his deathbed when you surrender again, and you're like, okay, screw the money, I'm dead anyway. The thought finally sneaks its way back to the front of your mind, where you're like, I need the real bird. And the minute you think that, the real bird comes back, sings, and you're recovered. So the bird was not punishing you. The bird was not, I'm going to go to the ocean, forget you, that's so insulting. When you go find the bird, it's there. It's not hidden. Right? It's hidden because you think the cow is a bird, you think the frog is a bird, but the bird is just right there. And when you finally see it, and it's like, oh, isn't it just a plain thing? And it's like, so the issue is with you, it's not with the bird. Right? And when it leaves, it's not because it's angry, it's because it prefers the ocean to your cube farm of a kingdom. And it's not punishing you, it's not hiding from you. When you actually recover your presence of mind and vision and bliss, all you have to do is think, I need the real bird, and it's there. Because the real bird loves you. You only lose your bliss because you tell it to go away. Okay. But the beauty of this, the beauty of and the muse is just like this. When you tell her to go away, she's like, okay, I'll go away. When you're like, no, come back, I need you. She's like, okay, here I am. What are we doing? Are you ready? And you're like, yeah, I'm ready. Okay, now do this. You're like, no, hell no, that's terrifying. Go away. He's like, okay, I'll go away.
Yeah.
She's ready. And, it's not a threat or anything, but it's like, she's immortal. You're the mortal. So she can do this all day for the next 30 years, right? When you realize, it's like that Chinese saying, it's like a person lives 2 lives, right? The first, I forgot what the saying is, but the first is when, you just live happily and you think you're going to live forever. And then your second life starts the minute you realize you're not going to live forever. And you're like, oh my gosh, and your life completely transforms and you're born again. Right. And so there's this this is so, chapter and verse, the Muse. That's very moving. It zinged me even harder the second time hearing you today. Which is, the king is revived. Everyone thinks he's going to die. He thinks he's going to die. He gets up, puts his robe on, and is like, I'm back, baby. I'm back. Right? I got my power back. I found my mojo again. The rock star is writing all this other music, and people are like, oh my gosh, this is like the Beatles or U2's next chapter. And they're just like, I don't even want to talk to the music critics. Take it or leave it. Right? Picasso moving from his blue period into his cubism period. That's such a Muse thing, right? Coming back, and it's like, he lost all kinds of money. He almost lost his dealer. And he told his dealer friend, it's like, look, I know I'm losing money. I know it's killing us, but it's like, and the dealer's like, why don't you just keep drawing blues at the same time as you draw the cubist paintings? So we can at least not starve. And he's like, my friend, I would love to do that, but you're talking as if I have a choice. Right? That's Picasso level following your muse. Right? She says, do it this way, and you do it this way. You don't question. You just do it. Right? That's the difference between Picasso and like a hack. And so this last crowning thing is you're back. You're back. You're in power. The garden is your realm. You're like everything's revived. You're back even better than before. And he's like, I'll give you anything. He's still in this like, what do you want in exchange for this?
Mm.
And the muse is like, I don't want anything. I already made the water come from your eyes. That's all I wanted. And we'll talk about what that means. And he's like, well, tell me something. Right? It's just a stim. It's just a nervous tick. Give me something to like give you. And she's like, all right, I'll tell you one thing. Stop talking about me. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Stop making me sing in court in front of all the critics and all the, fear, threat, and control.
Yeah.
Stop talking about me. He's like, okay. Right? And we'll see in the Nightingale too if he actually sticks to that. He probably won't. He'll probably circumambulate 2 steps back again. But welcome to humanity. We all do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But this is when the rock star starts painting, and everyone's like, "Oh, you painting that? We thought you were a rock star." You don't even explain. You don't even. It's. I have no comment. Or you say, "Oh, I'm just doodling around. It's no big deal." Right? It's a part of you that you don't really share with outsiders, but there's a part of your own inner self that you don't even share this part of you with. Where it's like, when you're ready and have learned your manners and are ready to talk nice, I can maybe let you in to see what I'm doing. Until then, this is to your own bully voice. It's like, get your shit together and then maybe we'll have a conversation. Now, the last point here, the stunning point about the motivation of a muse. Why is our muse so good to us? All right, why does our muse heal us and do all this stuff? Even though we are so dumb and petty and venal, right? The bird says it. That's why this is such a beautiful story. It's like chock full of like step by step, 1, 2, 3 in crayon recipe. The bird says, my greatest reward is not your gold ring or the silk string you put around my leg or the golden cage or all the clapping of the courtiers. What happens in the garden, it's irrelevant. It's nothing compared to the forest and the ocean.
Yeah.
My reward that you've already given to me is when I bring you to tears, when I make the water come from your eyes. What does this mean mythopoetically? As we've said time and time again in this series and everything I teach, water in a dream, mythopoetically, is a symbol of insight. When you dream, you're at the shore on the edge of the ocean. You're on the edge of the vastness of insight. Right? The salmon, the whales, the dolphins coming up are insights. The sharks that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting in the water, it's shark infested, is an insight that you fear. You fear it will eat you and consume you and kill you, transform you, change your life. So you don't go into the realm of insight. You fear it. Okay. When rain falls on you, when hail falls on you, one of you, I won't name you, you had sent me this dream about Hayden, and I had responded that it's a form of insight. Okay. So what does it mean when her reward is water comes out of the eyes of the king? So there are 3 realms, right? The palace garden, the forest, and the ocean. And all the insight, the fish come up from the ocean. And the nightingale is your muse singing the song of your bliss, making the fish come up, basically. Okay. And integration, the wholeness of the entire world, is the goal of bliss. Right? When I'm following the meaning and purpose of my life, my desires, and my needs and wants are being met as well. My needs and wants and desires all being met in one integrated flow of life. That's the ideal. That's the end point of healing, bliss, manifestation, everything. You are in deep flow. And the irony is, once you're in deep flow, it doesn't matter how long you live, you've achieved it. Right? So after you've achieved it, every minute of additional life is just gravy, and you're like singing, hallelujah all day long. Right? That's why in church you sing hallelujah, because the risen Christ, you're done. And yet the middle management of the actual human church has, proceeded to turn it into like a realm of fear, threat, and control. So when the nightingale from the ocean goes to the court and sings and makes the emperor cry tears of bliss and joy, the ocean, in the salty ocean in the form of salty tears, is coming out of the fountainhead of the emperor, the executive function. And thus the circuit of insight is complete. And this is why it is the nightingale's highest and only reward. The gold rings, the favorable reviews, the food, she doesn't give a shit about any of that. When she flies all the way, I mean, it would be better if the king came to the ocean and swam and cried. That's implied, right? But it's like, okay, if the nightingale's like, okay, if you want me to come, I'll come. If you want to tie a silk string around my leg, that's fine, whatever. But she sings and makes him cry, makes the ocean come out of his eyes. She's like, okay, good, I'm done. Mission complete. So this image gives you an insight into what the muse is really playing at in our lives. What game, what is she after, right? And to me, this is a symbol telling you that the muse is trying to take the deepest thing from the ocean side and send it into the world through you, your consciousness, to nourish the entire kingdom. Because when the king is listening to the real music, not the false music of the mechanical world, but the real music, he cries. And these tears, the emperor's tears, are powerful. Why? Because even your most profane, fear, threat, and control, driven by ambition, driven by power, hierarchy, I'm the king, I'm above everyone, right? It's all fear, threat, and control. Even that tightest, most clenched part of you is opened up, and the well of emotion, the well of the ocean comes up and overtakes you. And you know a priori that that king will be a good king and that everything will be in order. Everything's going to be fine. Right? So your liver is being generous by keeping you alive. Your lungs are generous in helping you to breathe, and their function is to keep you alive. In a similar way, the muse's function is generous. She's so, unconditionally loving of you. But she has a function in a manner of speaking as well. The function of the muse is to keep this cycle of bliss flowing through you, to send the ocean through you. Right?
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
Go ahead.
We go, the muse is so compassionate. The muse is so generous and everything. And it goes so sentimental over all this. And the muse is like, right now through you, she's telling me, just doing my job.
Yeah, just doing my job. And so, like, are you ready now?
Yeah.
It's like that joke in SpongeBob, which my kids watched when they were little kids. It's like, so are you ready now? How about now? 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 It's like, SpongeBob, shut up, leave me alone. It's like, okay, I'll just go, blowing bubbles or jellyfishing or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's this very subtle kind of Upanishadic first bird, second bird kind of thing going on here. And I think if there's a link to like the two birds thing, we can share that for those who are not familiar. There's a huge archetype of everything I teach, the two birds in the Upanishads. Like the logo of preside is a bird. And there's only one bird, not two birds. Because you are the second bird. Right? So when you look at reality, you only see the first bird because you are the second bird. So anyway, the way the nightingale does it is not to grab you by the shoulders, bring you out to the ocean, and show you the ocean. She doesn't bring you to the ocean as a separate entity and says, look, that's you. Right? Sorry. That's you as the first bird judging the ocean. Is it a plain ocean? Is it a jewel encrusted ocean? She does it through you as the second bird, the one who watches. So the ocean is not separate. She sends the ocean through you. And you realize the ocean, not because you see it as a separate thing, but because your vision is blurred by the water of your tears coming through the organs of your vision, your eyes. Right? And in a way, you realize you are the ocean and you are the second bird as you cry. Right? From the Upanishadic metaphor, when you look at the ocean, you're the first bird. When the ocean comes through you, you are the second bird. You realize you are the ocean. So this is kind of what happens, actually, when we do our cohorts. When we programs, I've been told this happens as well, but I'm not live there with you, right? But we're online doing the online cohorts when we're in Greece, in Athens and wherever, in Paris. From the dream you share with me, I talk about the archetype, and then we identify the archetype. And then in one form or another, you have this flash of recognition, and you realize the ocean, in a manner of speaking, is you. And as we're doing the interview exercise or whatever exercise we're doing together, people will just burst into tears. Right? Not because of anything I'm doing. Or doing the exercise, and they put two and two together, they connect the dots, and they realize, something about the bird, something about the fact that this is me. And they burst into tears. Literally, the ocean comes through in the form of the salty tears of their eye, and they're completely rejuvenated. Right? So, like as an advisor, as for me, as Gary, as an advisor, what's our function? Right? We are like the palace jesters, right? Where everyone's looking at the jewel Nightingale singing, and everyone's going, ooh, so good, so good. And we're the fools of the court, where we say to the king, so wait, where is the real Nightingale? And the king's like, you idiot, like, stop ruining my good time. Like, don't you know the best theater critics are here? Like, stop ruining the good time. We're all off with your head. And we're quiet for a while, and then we come back later and say, so where's the real Nightingale? Right? And that's why, people pay us money to do and find out about the real Nightingale. If we do our jobs right, you will metaphorically, archetypally burst into tears, because we will have been able to touch the jugular of the issue of, even if you have your bliss and you think you have your bliss, is it a jewel encrusted Nightingale? And like the fools at court, we're like, if you're okay with that, that's okay. And the king is like, shut up, I'm okay with it. I know what I'm doing. It's like, okay, we're going to go to the cafeteria and eat our free meal then. Thank you, Your Highness. Right? And so, like the king, so the story is a pattern. It's a symbol, not an allegory. It's not saying you better not go for the jewel encrusted bird or else. It's not fear, threat, and control. It's sacred. So there is no fear, threat, and control. There is no lesson here. It is revealing a pattern, a state of affairs that is so. So it is saying, you will find the Nightingale. And then you will find the obviously inferior. It has a placard around its neck from the Emperor of Japan saying, this is the inferior bird. And you will make it first anyway and lose the real bird, and you won't care for decades.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, you'll be like, sorry, the Muse, how can you ever forgive me? I'm so sorry, I've betrayed you. And the Muse wasn't betrayed. The Muse got a vacation because she didn't have to stay in your stupid cage.
Yeah.
And you're like, can you ever forgive me? I need you. Where are you? Will you ever? She'll never come back. It's over. I've ruined everything. And the minute you say that, the muse shows up in the window and says, "Are you ready now?" Now are you ready? You're like, "Fuck, yes, I'm ready." It's like, "All right, let's rock and roll." And this time, don't talk about it. Just go. In The Fisher King, the Parzival version of the story, the first encounter with the Grail, he sees the Grail King, and he completely cocks it up. I won't even, it's a whole separate story. In the second encounter, he gets it right. The first encounter is a complete disaster. The second encounter, you're not in that system. You don't even get a second chance. You miss it the first time, that's it, you're done. And somehow, and there's a whole separate story of how he actually gets to have the second encounter in the first place, which is part of the magic of that story. He somehow, through grace, gets the second encounter. He goes in and he gets it. He doesn't screw up the second time. And you see that two trial cycle here exactly.
Yeah.
So,
and for me, it's also, again, I go back to the meditation experience as well, because
yeah,
it seems like the bird's mechanism, the physics of its presence and its leaving, is very like what happens, when we first experience like the ocean of bliss experience, first time in meditation, we start talking about it. Oh, it was wonderful. Oh, it was this. Oh, it's that. It felt like this and it felt like that. And while we talk about it and while we try to recreate that experience again, and we're trying to clench and control, oh, I need to get the same experience again, and then it just never happens, because the very fact that you're controlling means that
right.
it's not sacred anymore, right?
Right.
And again, not as punishment, but because that's just how it works. And it comes back to you. I don't know if there is, like you said, grace involved or luck involved or just circumambulation, but basically when you're least expecting it, and you also kind of know that you talked too much about it last time, right? And it comes back some other time, and the next time, okay, this is something that you can't talk about. It's not that it's a rule that it's unspeakable or anything, but it's just that talking about it itself takes it away, right? That's just the physics of it.
Yeah, and I think the story is brilliant here, because if it were a simpler story, the king would just be like, "Oh, you sing nicely, but you're not pretty, so go away," right? And you dismiss your bliss. And then we're all like, "Well, that's stupid. We wouldn't do that. We would see past the lack of prettiness of the squirrel or the pigeon, and we would still appreciate the song," right? This story takes it one level deeper, even more subtle, where the way you lose your bliss is not that you say, "I don't want my bliss," but because you settle for the inferior bliss. The mechanical bird, right? Why do we like the mechanical bird better? Because it's prettier, right? You get prestige and money and prescriptive validation. So I have had a number of advisees over the years in this sort of archetype who are professional artists. Okay, musicians, performers, actors, dancers, who said, "Okay, I'm not going to be an accountant. I'm not going to work for Google. I'm not going to join an investment bank. I am going to dance. I am going to be a professional musician." But then once they do it, they say to themselves, "Okay, well, now I'm an artist. So I've conceded to my bliss. I am a musician. But now that I'm a musician, I better be rich and famous." So it's sort of like you're kind of getting away with it, where it's like, okay, so you are singing the song, but you have to be pretty. right? You have to fit in at court. So I'll be a musician, but I better be rich and famous. And we know from the story that's not the real bird. It's a replica, right? It's a manufactured, brute force, concocted replica who says to anyone who will listen, if you have eyes to see and are able to read the placard around its neck, I am the inferior path. And you take it anyway because it's prettier. And they're like, well, I'm not having a good time. My career isn't advancing. I don't understand. And I hate this. I'm starting to hate music now because it's all fear, threat, and control. And the music I'm playing is not the music I like. I'm just playing the prestigious music because this is how I get gigs.
It's very fascinating to me how the story plays this out, because there's something that comes to mind from the first story we did around this theme, the bird of truth, right?
Yeah.
And the boy and the girl are told to set out looking for this bird of truth in this place, in the castle, in the garden that it's kept. And the old woman who gives them the directions has a very specific thing to tell them, that there will be a lot of other birds around, and they're all very colorful and noisy, and they'll be making a lot of noise. There'll be cacophony of noises around this. They will try to distract you from going to the real bird of truth. You've got to push all of that out and keep going until you find the real bird, right? So there's a specific instruction that the boy follows, and right as she says, when he goes into the hall and there's all of this noises of all the other birds trying to distract, and he goes straight to that bird. And in this story, it's like the jewel encrusted bird for me was like, oh, is this the colorful, cacophonous, noisy birds trying to distract from the real bird? But somehow the kind of the way it happens is slightly different, because here's the courtiers and the king. They know they've seen the real bird first without any distractions, and yet when this distraction shows up, they're like, this is the one. So
yeah, so like the musician, you are playing music, but you're playing the false music.
Yeah.
And this is how you lose your connection with bliss. So this is why Bliss and the Muse are so terrifying. But the Muse, like the Nightingale, it doesn't threaten you. It doesn't negotiate. It just leaves. And when you say come back, it comes back. But make no mistake, bliss itself does not negotiate. You're the one who settles, but bliss never settles. The minute you settle, bliss flies out the window. Right? And for the giants who understand this, like a Picasso, they're basically like, I could still paint blues, but that's the mechanical bird at this point. And what am I even doing? If I'm going to paint, let me just paint, and I'm either going to paint or I'm going to be an accountant. Right? Because I'm like, if you want money and prestige, there's way easier ways to get money and prestige than being a dancer or a violinist or a stand-up comic. Okay. You can just work for Google or work for an investment bank and just make it rain all day. Right? If you're going to do this path, then just do it. Right? We'll figure out money and prestige along the way, but it's like, if we're going to follow it, let's follow it. Otherwise, it's like this half-assed thing where you don't really get either side. So with my kids, and we talk about this when we talk about manifestation, when we talk about bliss, there's need, want, and desire. Desire, i.e. your bliss, is the most rigid. It's not variable. It is constant. When we say find my bliss, we don't mean decide what my bliss is going to be. We mean discover what is already there and it cannot be changed. right? So with my kids, I try to gently encourage them to try and find their bliss and desire first. It's hard because when you're 16, like I didn't really find my bliss till I was 40. So I don't really have a leg to stand on to say like to my 16-year-old, what do you think your bliss is? Right. Uh, and just full disclosure, I'm still a Chinese dad. I want them to have their needs and wants met. Right. I care about prestige. But when I tell them to find their desire first, it's not because I'm some hippy dippy, oh, just throw caution to the wind and just follow your bliss. It's not that. It's precisely because I understand the physics of need, want, and desire. Desire is the most rigid, right? I can soothe and shield a million different ways and get my wants met, right? I can put food on the table and get my needs met a million different ways, right? I can get my needs and wants met as a high-tech person or as a healer, which is that's what I used to do and what I do now. But my bliss is not compatible with high tech. My bliss is only compatible with healing or whatever it is I'm doing now. Need and want, I can do in either case, right? So need and want, ironically, are the things that spark the most fear in us, but they're also the most malleable, right? So now, in terms of my want and wanting prestige or whatever, I'm not on the cover of whatever high-tech magazine, right? I end up showing up in a Gaia feature film, right? So I can still get my not petty, but it's still valid. My wants and desire for prestige and everything. That's fine. Either way, I can do it. But my bliss is only satisfied by what I'm doing now. So when I come into contact with desire, the card turns over. I realize what it's asking me to do next. And there is no negotiation. The bird sings as it sings. The bird looks plain. It's not going to wear your stupid golden ring to look prettier. And when it doesn't feel like singing, it stops. There is no negotiation. Your only choice is, do you honor the bird or not? And this is why people stop talking to their muses after a while. Like Gary, I think a lot of people in the audience, they've worked with us. They've had experience of hearing the muse. And after a while, I do this myself. You stop going to the muse and asking questions because it's terrifying. And you settle for this mechanical bird life. It's pretty. The neighbors won't talk. And you're still kind of getting some blissy stuff. We'll happily settle for that. But that's not your real song. Right? That's not your real song.
Yeah, so I just left a link to the Need, Want, Desire video where you kind of give out the whole mechanics of needs and wants and desires and how to map them out. So put a link to that. There's so much there, and I agree. Desire is so inflexible that you could actually sort of tweak your needs and wants, not tweak the needs and wants themselves, but how you get them fulfilled. It's just that we already have fear that what if I follow my bliss and need, want doesn't get fulfilled? We somehow have this presumption in our minds that if I follow my bliss, I will starve. It's a given. I'm not even going to argue about it. If I follow my bliss, I don't think I will have prestige. So we have all of these, that's the profane kind of narrative around bliss.
Well, I think it also depends on the person, right? This is why when we do advising, you see different kinds of initial archetypes where people are in.
Yeah.
For one person, it might be, if I follow my bliss, I won't get my needs and wants met. I'll starve.
Yeah.
For a different person, it may be, if I follow my bliss, I'm going to get my needs and wants met. But I'm going to show up my mother or my father who sacrificed everything for me. They didn't become a violinist. They did become an accountant so that I could actually be a violinist or do whatever I want. Right. And you hear this all, its parents will say, well, I never had the opportunities that you had. Right. It's true. It's kind of ungrateful to say anything to the contrary. Well, when a parent says that, it's implying that like the only reason you get to do what you're doing is because you have the opportunities that I gave you. Right. And it's like, it's often not true. It's like, if you gave your parent the same opportunities, it's not a given that they would have won the Nobel Prize like you did, or gotten into schools that you did, et cetera, et cetera. It's like a compensation they're saying to themselves. And it's like, how can you begrudge them that on the one hand? Right. And on the other hand, it puts a lot of us into a state of fear where it's like, I can achieve, but I can't achieve too much, because if I overdo it, my mom will feel like she was a complete idiot, that she made sacrifices that she didn't have to make. She could have done both as well. And so to not hurt my mom, I'm not going to overachieve on my bliss. So that's just two examples. There's dozens. I mean, we've seen so many different examples of the initial archetypes where people are in. And so when we help people see them, they're like, oh my gosh, that's it. And then we're like, okay, do you like it? Because I don't know. If you like it, carry on, no action needed. If you don't like it, or there's something you want to adjust, then let's pop the hood, get to work, and see if we can navigate to a new archetype and basically change your life, create the life of your dreams, however we call it. Right? Yeah. It's not magic, right? It's a lot of work. And it's not just a question of luck, or it's a question of like, are you honest with yourself about what your actual desire is? So I have advisees who are, I don't know what you call it, millionaires, centimillionaires, billionaires, and they don't know what their desire is when they first come to me. And you're like, how is that possible? They can do anything. Do they have anything? Yes, but they got to their position in a world of late stage capitalism, you know, the jungle, dog eat dog business. So they got to where they got through exercising the muscles of want and need, through fear, threat, and control. They are the king in their garden, or queen in many cases. And their garden is the vastest. It's a billionaire garden. Yeah. And it's so vast and so perfect. You can snap your fingers and anything will come to you. And so this king at the beginning of the story can have anything, but he's never heard of the Nightingale. He has no concept, because his garden is need and want. He's never tasted true desire. Right? And the courtiers, all the parts of you that enable you, your bank accounts, your private wealth advisors, you know, wealth managers, they can't tell a cow from a frog either, because they're lower than you on the totem pole, and they're just running around trying to like not get fired by you.
And this tiny little detail in the story is that even the first time that he hears of the Nightingale is through books. It's like through the intellect, right? He hears the concept of the Nightingale, but he still has no idea what it looks like, what it sounds like. And that happens to a lot of us. You know, the first time we actually come across this is through the intellectual pursuits, and it's so disembodied. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we work with everyone, right, across all walks of life and everything. But I kind of, you know, I do love working with folks who are, you know, who in the need and want area are competent. They've got it, you know, one way or another. They have a spouse that works, so they work. You know, they've basically done everything we've asked you to do in the realms of competence, prestige, and you've gotten to a point where you're just like, okay, I've done everything society is asking you to do. Jeweled bird, not the real bird. No bird, just stay in the garden, keep your head down, smile and carry on. I've done all that. And now I'm the queen and the king in my garden. I've never even heard of anything outside the garden. But what I do know is that I am not happy. I can't get out of bed in the morning. You know, I have money, I have the prestige, and I am not happy. I'm successful, but I am not happy. And me, I have like a special empathy for this, because it's like, I mean, first of all, that's the way I was for like decades, right? And it's just this feeling of like unfairness. It's like, you're the best of like what we try to produce in our society. And like a good soldier, you've done everything we've asked you to do and more. and yet you're not happy. And when you realize one morning you're not happy, again, like a good soldier, you blame yourself. And I'm like, after a certain point, we've crossed the line in the sand where it's like, no. At some point, it cannot always be your fault that you're not happy. You've already done everything. The in-laws, society, your peers, your teachers, your parents have asked you to do. You've done everything they've asked you to do, chapter and verse, and you're still not happy. So you're like, oh, I must have screwed up somewhere along. And it's like, no, that doesn't cut it after a certain point. Right? The system itself has failed you. There is a bug in the computer code of civilization, more than one bug. And it's like, you deserve happiness. You deserve to at least have the permission within yourself to even ask the question, what do I desire, not just need and want? What are the things I like for no good reason? Without a voice slamming it down saying, how are you going to make money doing that? That's irrelevant. That's a nonsense waste of time. It's like, no more. We've done that all our lives. We've done everything you've asked, and we're still not happy. Something is wrong. So when we work with people like this, and they find their desire, it's kind of insane, because it's like, to a certain degree, it's like they can finally start to enjoy all the success they have actually earned and suffered for all their lives. Right? They can finally enjoy it for real. And many of them realize, all this money and prestige I made, I don't need like a half of a percent of everything I've made to be happy. And there's some grief associated with that, but largely it's liberation, where it's like, yeah, and I have it, I don't know, I'll give it away, I'll help other people, whatever. But it's like, I am in a very good place now, with or without all this money and prestige that I brought along with me. And often they're like, I'm ready to help other people as well. And it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of beautiful. That's why we call ourselves advisors, not therapists. It's not medical. We're not helping people through trauma per se. We're certainly not trying to fix you. It's like, you're cruising along, you're successful. I mean, we just sent out an email a couple of days ago. You're successful, but not happy. And it's like, if we can't help you figure that out, what's the point of everybody else? It's like, if you're at this point and we're like, we want everyone in the developing world to be able to have this lifestyle and opportunities as well. Well, that's great. But it's like, if you're it and you're doing it and you're doing everything, burning a huge carbon footprint, sort of buying stuff, consuming, and you're still not happy. It's like the rest of us are screwed, right? The entire experiment is a failure. So I have passion around this, because it's like, when you get your need, want, and desire all lined up, your heart opens up, tears come to your eyes as the emperor. And you're like, the entire kingdom needs to be fixed and healed. And you start caring about, as an example, you start caring about things like social justice, and you start caring about things like the environment and equity and all these other things, because it reflects the equity and regard for, not just the garden, but the wooded area and the nightingale and the ocean and the fish within you, and that reflects in the outer world.
Thank you for that. So what's the exercise?
Okay, sorry, yeah. So we're a little over time. Okay, so here's the exercise. Only if you want, no pressure, no fear, threat, and control. Just a suggestion. So the exercise is, what is the song of your life, as sung by the nightingale? When was the last time you heard it? Have you ever heard it? And if you're like, I don't know if ever, how do you even get to that point? That's why we do the jobs we do, because the labyrinth of each kingdom and queendom is unique to each person, like a fingerprint. Your particular situation is unique. How do we get to the forest and the ocean from the garden and palace realm of you as you stand now in your life. Right? And by the way, just living in your garden would be fine if you didn't fall ill. Right? There's something embedded in the story where if you just stay in the garden and you don't have the nightingale, you will eventually fall ill. Maybe that's okay. But this is largely the fate of modern society. We pretend there is no forest or ocean within us. I mean, look at what we do to the real forests and oceans out in the modern world. It's a reflection of what we do to our inner forests and oceans. And we live in a state of curse because of that, self-imposed curse. Right? If you're burning and polluting your own forest and oceans within you, no God from the outside needs to punish you. You are in hell. Right? Even me as a healer, I'm a tech guy. I like scale. So I used to ask questions like, how do we cure the world or heal the world? And it's not going to be through a mechanical one-size-fits-all kind of thing. I would love that as a tech person to find something scalable, right? But this story tells you literally that the mechanical solution is not the real solution. It'll get you through for a decade or two. But the real song of, in my case, my art, which is healing, not painting, not anything else. The real song cannot be controlled or predicted, but it is always there if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, as the Christ and others have said. Right, so that's why I offer programs, but also I'm moving more and more to these live advising cohorts, because I'm like, you know, it's only 10 or 15 people at a time in Athens or whatever, but it's like I have to get out of the mechanical bird mode of trying to force everything to scale. And it's very hard for me because the mechanical bird scales like a jam. And it's the song is pretty. The song is pretty, but it's not the deepest, most powerful song. And even in myself, I'm like coming to grips with that.
Thank you.
Anything to add?
Just lots and lots of thoughts and insights that came through. This is like a giant fishing session in itself.
This is a giant fishing session.
Yeah.
This is a giant fishing
You
session.
just haul so much fish, but then you need to go back and take the basket and see how much fish you've even taken out.
Yeah, like that story of the ghost in the forest.
Yeah.
We hauled a lot of fish.
Yeah.
Don't burn me and beat me up when you take me back to the village.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
All right, should I close the session?
Yeah, right.
All right, let's close the session. Okay, so I'm going to put the link up.
Yeah, for the
next month's session. Only if you want. Share with your friends. Only if you want. Free and open to the public. Okay. And I'll go ahead and close our session. Sorry we ran over time today. I hereby thank you, everyone, and I hereby close this session of our shared sacred space. Thank you for holding this space with me and us, and thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, and the spiritual nourishment of this shared sacred space with us. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, and free of the undue control of others. Have a great Sunday, have a great month, and I will see you all in the next session. Thank you so much. Thank you.